أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العظيم. Duster Ya Sayyidi Medic Ya Rasulullah. Duster support Ya Sheikh Muhammad. Subhanallah, Sultanullah, Nabi Muhammad alayhi salam. Subhanallah, Sultanullah, Nabi Muhammad alayhi salam. Subhanallah, Sultanullah, Nabi Muhammad alayhi salam. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Allah. So I saved this topic until Friday afternoon because Friday after the Friday prayer is a very spiritually powerful time. It's a good time to sit in meditation and reflect about the creation and the relationship we have as human beings with our Creator. Sitting and remembering, we call it zikr Allah, that remembrance of God. Just sitting quietly and meditating and repeating the names of God. So we are attempting to tackle the subject of spirituality today, which is a critical component in the Hijama process, one that gets overlooked and ignored because the people that are entering this field really don't have any understanding about it and really don't want to have any understanding about it. In fact, many of them actually reject it. Which is really an absolute shame. We talked about the mohel, the person in the Jewish faith who does the circumcision, and hopefully you looked at some of the information and additional reading and additional videos that were on that classroom assignment, because it gets into quite a bit of interesting information that talks about the spiritual aspect, that it's different from going and asking a surgeon to do this, that there's a critical spiritual element to this, that it's a process of removing actually negative energy from the child when you're performing the circumcision and when you're acting in the obedience of your Creator and doing what Abraham did. So we like to touch upon that as much as we possibly can within our own limited capacity, of course. And it's interesting to know that it is, something that is not well understood by most Muslims, and it really is absolutely central to good belief and good faith, and it is critically important for somebody to have a pure heart in order to be able to touch the things that enable us to truly understand and to reach out to our Creator. So Satan can read the Quran back and forward, upside down. He can read it, better and memorize it better than most anybody that I certainly know of. And they, or there are people that, memorize the Quran and they call themselves Hafiz. And you're not a Hafiz simply by memorization of the Quran. Just rotten memorization of the Quran and being able to spit back what you've, put into your brain is not what a Hafiz is all about. A Hafiz is somebody who actually protects the Quran. In order to protect it, you have to be able to understand it. So you're not only protecting the actual words in the Quran itself, you're protecting the meaning of the Quran by teaching and sharing that meaning with others. So there's a huge difference between this concept that you're a Hafiz simply because you have memorized the Quran. Satan has memorized the Quran. He knows the Quran inside and out, like I said, and backwards and forwards. But the problem is he can't touch it. He doesn't have or possess the purity of heart to be able to touch the Quran. So the meaning that you have to have wudu, you have to be pure in order to touch the Quran. Most people interpret that to mean that you have to have wudu, the ritual ablution, or ghusl, a bath, or just the washing of the face and the arms, and the lesser of the washing requirement. So it doesn't, that's part of the meaning, but the true deeper meaning is that you have to have a pure heart to be able to be effectuated by the Quran. And what's interesting is that it's also said that people who read the Quran that don't have that purity of heart, it actually can drive you further into disbelief. So it can have the reverse effect on your heart if you don't, have a pure heart to begin with. So the purity of the heart, the spiritual aspect of the human being, which requires the heart to be, clean, is critically important for a Muslim to be able to attain a better understanding of their religion. Too much today is focused on the do's and don'ts and the hadith and repeating, different things, and they've turned religion into academic pursuit, and now you're an imam if you get a degree from a university. And this is really not the methodology, certainly, that the prophets used to teach people. It was more or less, just sitting, as we talked about in the class before this, sitting at the feet of the prophet, and it was a spiritual connection, a heart-to-heart connection that enabled the teacher, the prophets of that day, and then, of course, later the saints and, authorized teachers through the various chains would be given this power, that they could literally be in the presence of their student, even though they're halfway around the world. So more and more through metaphysics, we're beginning to understand these things. And I would encourage, anybody who's thinking about getting into this field to gain a much better understanding of these things. It's not something that you're exposed to in an Islamic college too much. And schools like Abu Nur in Damascus, they touched upon it a little bit with different tazkiyah classes, purification of the heart, and they would do certain dhikrs and things of that nature. But this concept of rabita, which was a heart connection with the actual teacher, is something that is not very well understood in the general Muslim world. But it's something critically important for somebody who's going to, attempt to be a healer, because that connection is something that you need in order to try to help the patients that are coming to you. So spirituality, it could be approached from many different directions now, and it is something that is critically important, and something that is activating the senses of the heart. So similar to the physical senses of sight and hearing and taste and smell and touching, we also have senses of the heart. And those senses of the heart are activated through exercises that have been tried and true, that have been passed down from generation to generation. And they're meditative exercises. They're exercises, this dhikr of Allah. A lot of people sat in circles, and if you look at Aboriginal tribes and the history of these circles, there's a lot of different worship services and stuff that actually formulate in a circle, and a lot of different exercises that are around the concept of chanting or meditation. And this is in divergent, locations throughout the world. So it's interesting to see the similarities between a lot of the different faith practices that basically point to the same thing. Some of the Native American practices of the sweat lodges and the seclusion, and the going off and, trying to get a dream. And, these are all very similar to some of the teachings and spiritual, understanding of what we call the Sufis, which is a term that wasn't used during the time of the Prophet, but it has come to connotate people who, are pursuing this spiritual aspect of their religion. And that's really all it means. And people who have a respect for this teacher-student chain that goes back to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Without that chain, anybody can say anything and make up anything, and there's no, substance behind what they're saying because there's no chain, there's no authority. So when a teacher teaches a student, there's an authority behind that. And nobody can really tell you that you're free of your ego and that you're, spiritually advanced enough to now take up the banner of a, practitioner. You really need a third party to do that for you that has gone through that process himself and is qualified to say that you're ready for that process as well. So it's an extremely important and extremely deep subject. Again, the Jewish faith and the Christians, I think, even have a better handle on it than most of the Muslim community today, which is kind of surprising because it's so critically important to religion that you have, a spiritual connection, that you're in touch with your heavenly being, and that you've activated these senses of the heart. So Christians will tell you that they have a personal relationship with Jesus, and they talk about the Holy Ghost, and these are alluding, to topics of spirituality. It's not, in my understanding, certainly not completely factually correct on some levels, but the sincerity and the desire to want to pursue that spiritual nature is very, very strong within the Christian faith, and within the Jewish faith, especially like Kabbalism and whatnot. It's very strong. So if you don't, although, maintain that very strict teacher-student relationship, and if it breaks at any time and there becomes somebody who's truly not authorized starting to take up the banner of a leader or a teacher, things get corrupted very quickly. So that whole process of isnad, they call it, which is the chain of transmission of teaching, is critically important in preserving the authentic teaching. And that's something that the Jewish faith has left off, and the Christians don't have something similar to. So it's really what differentiates the Muslim world, especially amongst the Sufis, that they are still respecting this. Now, most of the Muslim world is not respecting this, and that's wherein lies the problem in most of the Muslim world, and why there's no authority really in the teachings anymore, and they're mixing imagination and confusion, and everybody is entitled to an opinion now, and everybody goes on the internet and extrapolates whatever decision they think is best, and they apply it. And this is not the methodology that preserves the actual faith and the actual religion. The ego creeps in, and it starts, telling people that they're Hafiz of the Quran simply because they memorize the Quran, and this is just absolutely absurd. Shaitan is a Hafiz of the Quran in that case, and he's not a Hafiz of the Quran because he can't preserve what he doesn't understand. So we can come from the direction of science, because science is now kind of catching up to, spiritual people. Spiritual people have always understood that prayer has an enormous power to effectuate change, not only in your own life, but in other people's lives. It's not, mumbo jumbo. It's not craziness for people to, ask God for rain. That's not nonsense for somebody to say, please, help cure my mother through prayer. It's not mumbo jumbo to repeat, certain Quranic passages or names of God on water and transforming that water into something which is, curative and has a power that people just can't simply explain today. But there are things coming close to explain that, namely Masaru Emoto's work on energy resonance or water memory, whereby he does these experiments of putting, the word hate on a bottle of water, and then another bottle of water he puts the word love, and another bottle of water he puts, the word bigotry, or whatever the case may be. And with extreme consistency, that word that is placed on the water, with everything else the same, the water, the cleaning process, the jars, everything else is a constant. The only thing that changes is that word on the bottle of the water. And he comes back and he takes water and freezes it, and then he takes the individual crystals and he compares a crystal with a word that was on the water. And with absolute consistency, the word matches the clarity and the beauty of the crystal that was formulated from the energy that went into that water from that word. So there's a couple of videos in the class, room website, which I encourage you all to read or to listen to. And of course, there's additional reading information and whatnot. And the subject goes so deep. It's really, really fascinating. And, while it's not necessary for an introductory course on Hijama, or for you to find out somebody who, really is truly authorized practitioner, it's simply enough for you to know that it's necessary to have somebody who's pure and clean, really doing this, and somebody who is vetted for this higher, spiritual acumen, for high moral standards. And somebody can't do that themselves. So they need somebody who has gone through a process of purification that is pure themselves to be able to judge somebody else, whether they're pure enough or not, to embark on a process of this nature. And that's true across the board for anybody who's going to be an imam or, any kind of a teacher of the religious sciences at all. Should have a purity quality about it, but these universities, which have adopted kind of a Western way of thinking, have pretty much gotten away from that. Again, some of the universities incorporate part of that in there, but in my opinion, they don't go too far. And they're still skirting on the concept that a degree is the methodology that you use to obtain these things. And it really is not. So I think a little bit later in the program or the course, we'll probably get into that a bit more. But there's also experiments like Tesla that was doing, he was doing a lot of energy work and doing discoveries that pretty much produced free electricity. And if he was allowed to continue, the whole, oil industry and pretty much the control that they are able to exert by maintaining possession of that energy, so they can tax, the oil consumption through gasoline, like, taxes and prices. And through the meter that comes into your house, they can judge how much you use, and then they can tax and charge you for that. So it's a mechanism of control. And if you gave people free energy, which is quite possible, you would set humanity free. And there's an elite group of people who are very happy with enslaving humanity, and they want to keep and maintain that control. So they've eliminated a lot of people that have come up with incredible solutions for, utilizing free electricity, basically. And it's through this resonance kind of understanding that energy was, developed into something that became free. So it's interesting. And most of the electricity that comes into your house, it doesn't dissipate. It actually loops and goes back out into the line. So they're charging you for something that they, get back. So, and now with these smart meters on the houses, they can calculate and read every single appliance that's doing what, and they can spy on you, and they can, start charging you for, over usage of your refrigerator is okay, but your, television's using too much electricity, so we're going to charge you an extra tax for that. And again, it's all about control, and it's all about revenue producing methods to keep them in power and keep them, well paid. So you have that whole field of energy that you can look into by, researching, and some of the information you'll find again on the classroom page. We'll get into the Tesla, experimentations. There's another gentleman that's doing some work with that, and there's a video that you can watch about that. And then there's tons and tons of information on the internet, both from the metaphysical standpoint, but also from a quote unquote scientific standpoint. So there's another scientist, used to be a doctor, who's doing stuff on water memory too, and there's a video relating to that on the classroom webpage as well. But how does this all relate to, Hijama? I came here to learn Hijama, not learn spirituality, is what most of you might be saying. But they're intricately related. You can't separate the two. We're human beings. We are energy. We are water, and if you accept the premise that, this energy resonance of, putting an intention or a word on water can have a profound effect on changing the molecular structure and creating, a beautiful crystal where there's good energy on it, and create an ugly, dark, looking crystal when you put bad energy on it, then you have to understand that the process of healing and the process of dealing with patients and the process of, illness and whatnot is, intricately intertwined in spirituality. And you can also approach it now from, the scientific method that they're calling, what's the word they're using now? It's for meditation. It's not coming to my mind right now, but there's a whole new meditation movement that is mindfulness. They're calling it mindfulness because they don't want to call it meditation because of the religious connotation to it. So they're trying to hide that aspect of it and make it, more scientific, more acceptable by the people who don't believe in religion. But the religious component is, crucially important in the process of spirituality, more so than anybody can understand. But anyway, they're going with this mindfulness, and that meditation is working very well in prisons and, juvenile homes, and it's helping, people to actually change the white matter in their brain. So they put them under, MRIs and measure people who begin the meditation process, and within 6, 7, 8 weeks, I believe it was a Harvard study that did this. Within 8 weeks, the white matter, or the gray matter of the brain, was completely transformed, and you could see the brain just completely changing over into something completely different. And it just remarkable what effect it had on the human being. So this meditation wasn't necessarily the prescribed or best, form of meditation. It was simply sitting and being quiet and trying to empty the mind of all thoughts. But there is better, methodologies that will advance you even faster and higher than, the quote unquote mindfulness. So I would encourage people to look into that too, and I'm sure I'll have some information for you on the classroom webpage about that as well. But they're utilizing this, and they're saying that it's helping now with the healing process. People heal quicker. Their brains actually grow, and their intellect increases through these mindfulness exercises. And it's, like everything else that comes down the pike, try to remove the actual religious component of it, and then they try to add the dollar component to it so they can make money. So, they have classes and you go and spend hundreds of dollars to learn something that should otherwise be free. And if you go the route of, a proper Sufi teacher, then, those gatherings are always free, and you go and sit with them. There's keys, there are spiritual tried and true traditions that are like keys that open up stations, that open up levels of purity, levels of understanding. And as you progress through this, the world becomes a much, much bigger, much more interesting place, because your senses of the heart begin to start taking shape, and you activate those senses of the heart, and then you can start understanding, like, some of the things that are in the Bible that seem a little fantastic, like, encountering angels, or, understanding events are going to happen in the future, or, things of that nature. There's something probably that should be said right now, that this concept of spirituality is more than science, is polluted by the negative aspect of spirituality, which is the, tarot card readings and the fortune tellers. And while when your heart is open through these purification exercises, you can access, certain things. It's easier to access those things through the negative pursuit of spirituality, which is, the age-old saying of selling your soul to the devil. And that really happens. I mean, going down to the crossroads to sell my soul to the devil so I can be a famous rock star. And people literally do that, and it actually is attainable, and it's easy because it's, so readily available. You just have to make that intention, and those things start to open up for you. There are creatures, jinn they call them, which are made out of fire. We're made out of clay. And these jinn creatures are, given free will like the human being was given. And they can assist and help people who are on the dark side. Like human beings, there's, good jinn and there's bad jinn. And the bad jinn are serving, Satan, who's their leader. And they, are obedient to him, and they assist and help those who are also giving themselves over to worshiping Satan. So they, can help you and assist you in knowing information about people. They can help you and assist you in knowing events about the future. But this is all coming from an extremely negative point, and it's coming from people that, are loyal and, worshiping Satan. So are those the people that you want to be in cahoots with? And, are those the things that you want to, associate with? Absolutely not. And those, beings will tell you 99 truths in order to get you to believe one lie that they tell you later, that is that critical lie that changes everything in your life and it causes your own downfall. Mostly spiritually speaking, but also materially, mentally. So people, access that stuff because it's an easy route to getting, spiritual awareness and spiritual understanding. and it's an easy route to, charge people for, telling their fortune or telling their future. The psychic business in America, especially, is just, unbelievable amounts of money are spent for people. And I mean, even high level people, corporations are using psychics to try to get an edge on their competition. And, presidents, leaders of state are utilizing it to try to get the edge on their, political opponents. I understood Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan used it quite a bit. And it, it's a subject of a lot of defense contractors utilizing, different methodologies to try to get a leg up on their, their adversaries or whatever. So there's quite a bit of information on that, on remote viewing, and I mean, all of this stuff is, spent millions and millions of dollars. Russia, had a huge program on this kind of stuff. And they wouldn't be spending all this money if they, didn't think that they would get some sort of results out of it. And, the human mind is, much more sophisticated than any radio. And you can tune a radio to a certain station and pick up a transmission. So why not the brain able to pick up transmissions from future airwaves or, future events or past events? It's all, frequency. It's all energy. So if you can tune into that, you can, pick it up, and then you can utilize it. And the people, they use it to empower themselves, because, it's a position of kind of status, and people really revere those who can tell them a little bit about their future. And they make tons of money on this kind of stuff. But it's all dark, it's all in cahoots with these, jinn, these other creatures or beings, spirit beings, who are loyal to, the evil side of things. And eventually it's going to catch up to you. It's going to spiral down, and it may take 10 years, may take 20 years before you actually feel the effects. Because you're given a rope, you're, given lots of time to enjoy your, your rewards for making this deal with the devil. So God allows you to, experience that for a while, and then later the punishment comes. So don't confuse, all to say, spirituality. When I talk about spirituality, don't, think that I'm talking about tarot cards or fortune telling or anything else like that. The path towards the real spirituality, the pure spirituality, is incredibly arduous and unbelievably difficult. And that's why, it's so hard to become a Hijama practitioner. It's not because you, have to study for years and years to learn how to put a, piece of fire in a cup and throw it on somebody's skin. Again, that's relatively easy to do. But the necessity for somebody to be pure of heart, that is not going to inflict their bad energy on somebody, is what's crucially important. And to vet somebody, I mean, whether you believe in the Ijaza system, or you don't believe in the Isnad, or you're scared to death of the word Sufi, which a lot of people are, there's tons of, closet Sufis out there that are Sufi when, the doors are closed, and they go to hudras and, dhikrs, and they do all sorts of things, and then they, come back out into the public eye, and they are still very much attracted by the donations that they can receive from the general Muslim population. So they want to keep secret what, their Sufi nature. But the vast majority of accomplished, converts, especially, are Sufi inclined, at least. And, whether they want to say that or not, I think it's extremely wrong of people not to discuss that openly and to talk about it, because it makes it more difficult on the people that are talking about it, because there's a big taboo, and there's an absolute, battle against Sufism, because it is the path that will lead people towards, peace and enlightenment and better understanding. And they are the people who will put down the radical, jihadist Islam that is, wreaking havoc in the world today, which is predominantly, promoted and instituted by enemies of Islam. It's not anything to do with Islam. Another topic, another 10 books I could write on that subject. That these are proxy armies, pretty much, this whole ISIS thing. But boy, if I get off track on that, I'll never come back to what we're supposed to be talking about. So maybe another time I'll talk about that. But things are not what they seem to be. Even in the Christian community, I talked about Islam and how, a lot of spies overseas were rewarded with citizenship and now running, Islamic organizations in America. But the same holds true with Christian organizations. They have the what do they call it? I can't remember it now. Well, I'll try to think of it, and if it comes to me a bit later. But it's effectively recruiting, major, like especially these mega churches, their leaders to be agents of the government. The clergy response teams or something like that, I think is what they're called. I don't know. But if you search, clergy, government, recruitment for clergy, Christian clergy or something like that, you'll probably find it on the internet. But this is really, real, that they, allow through this 501c3, organization to control the finances of these churches, and they allow, these church organizations to take huge amounts of donated money. In return, though, they want, their loyalty to help them, keep an eye on the flock, so to speak. So it's not just the Islamic faith. I don't mean to, focus and beat up just the Muslims, but, Christians have it, and other religions have it, and even the media has it, and there's, think tanks that are promoting people in important walks of life, so the sciences have it. It's people that are, planted into these positions to effectuate change, but not for the better, really for propaganda purposes. So it's not, simply a matter of the Muslims being, completely ignorant about these things and being manipulated. We're being manipulated from all sides now. But there are the closet Sufis, I call them, that, don't like to speak about these things because it is a subject that has been given, a lot of propaganda and a lot of attention in order to keep it down. So people don't understand that Islam is the religion of love. It is the religion of peace. It is a religion of, spirituality, and it is a religion of enlightenment, and it is what most people, we're searching for, in India, or we're looking for it in, in the Far East in Buddhism, or, going back into, Judaism and to the Kabbalist kind of teaching, or the New Age kind of, love vest kind of stuff, which is just, really off its kilter. But the Islamic component of this, isnad and this ijaza is what keeps it pure. Not to say that there's not people claiming all sorts of things that they, have been given authorization from their teacher, and it's a lie. They haven't. The truth is that out of the Abrahamic religions alone, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, there's over 200 sects. And out of those 200 sects, over 200 sects, only one way is absolutely correct. So nobody ever said this was going to be easy. It's extremely difficult to find that one way. The good news is that if you're sincere, that even if you get off track and you find, the wrong teacher or the wrong path, that sincerity will eventually bring you back around. And the really good news is that when you have 7 last breaths, Allah reveals to you the truth. And and that we all succeed in the end. That's something people don't like to talk about because they all like to think they possess the winning ticket. But, it's much better if you struggle and try to find that truth in this life. For many different reasons. Because you want to have a happy life, for starters. And that happiness comes in the spiritual awakening, the spiritual understanding that comes from truly understanding who we are. Know thyself, right? That age-old saying. Know thyself means know thy heavenly self. We have a heavenly representation of ourselves, which is our true self. And then we have this representation here on earth, which is just a small, tiny little piece of who we really are. So, spirituality, as related to Hijama, is critically important. Becoming that conduit, you are not the healer. The healer is the creator. He has come up with a cure for every corresponding illness. And if you go to the doctor gives you a pill, and you shouldn't believe that pill is what's responsible for your cure. It's still completely and totally the creator who is using that as a means or a mechanism, but it's not the cure. So the process of paying people, even if you should not be paying them, but if you pay somebody anyway, doctors are making exuberant amounts of money, that payment becomes a charity, that charity becomes a protection, and it becomes part of the healing process as well. So all these components go into what health results when somebody's seeking assistance in curing themselves from the illness that they're experiencing. I just watched a video from my teacher today relating to the importance of food and how most of the food is responsible for the illness in the world. And these traditions that I myself left off, I started thinking they weren't that important, and it was kind of silly or foolish to be doing such ritualistic things, actually have a profound effect and have huge importance in overall health. And unfortunately, most of the Muslims today are not doing these things either. The simple act of taking a little bit of salt before you eat is an enormous protection. And in today's radiation world, it probably has much more profound effects than we even understand on that level as well. But on a spiritual level, it has huge ramifications. And then, from a physical standpoint, it probably activates, something in your stomach that acts as a protection as well. That, helps the digestive process or begins a process that will kill the bad bacteria or problems that, are contained in your food that you might consume. So we simply don't know, all the answers for why you do these things. And if you say, I'm not going to do them because I don't fully understand them, well, then, illness will probably take hold, because that illness becomes a blessing to let you know that these things are not foolish, that these things are necessary, and they're for your protection and for your benefit. Nothing in religion is because, he wants obedient slaves. God is not, a vindictive, harsh God who likes to torment people. He's a loving, wonderful person who wants absolutely the best for the creation that he's made. And that creation is stubborn because it has, this huge ego, and it wants to be its own God. And you have to struggle with that. That's the animalistic desire of the human being. And then we have a human, side of our being, and you have to, bring that side of it out and repress the animalistic side. And when you do that, you become fully realized. You become really what you were created to be. And it's an incredible struggle to do that. So these little things that might seem like, do's and don'ts, and, they're made to be do's and don'ts by most of the religious people, never thinking beyond why these things are necessary. They call it the Maqasid or Maqasid Sharia, the reasons or the objectives behind the Sharia, the Islamic law. And they, don't contemplate these things. And it's said that contemplation is, better than prayer. So many thousands of prayers are equal to 1 hour of contemplation, something like that. I know I don't have that exactly correct, but it's something of that nature, showing the absolute importance of not only contemplation, but meditation, thinking on these things through your heart again and not through your mind. Opening that awareness is what's critically important, so you can truly understand these things. The physical senses, they lie to us. Like I said before, you put your thumb up to the moon, you think the moon is smaller than your thumb. But you sit on the moon and it's another situation. So our heart doesn't lie. And if we can activate those senses and we can perceive the world with those senses, then we understand truth. And understanding that truth makes the obedience easy because we understand the meaning and the objectives behind why we're ordered to do things that we're supposed to be doing. So I suffered, from health. I'm still coming back from it, actually. Some of the, better healers are people that have been through this themselves and learned through their own mistakes. But I left off a lot of these practices, making prayer before you eat, and washing your hands before you eat, and washing your hands after you eat, and making a prayer after you finish your meal, and then salt before and after, just a little taste. These things are not, simple matters. They're huge protection. And as we understand the memory of water, the food has memory as well. So simply by saying the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim before you, do something, gives that a power, it gives it an energy, and it transforms it, even on a molecular level. So what does it do to the food, when you effectuate these, these requirements before you eat, to say a prayer, to take a little bit of salt, to wash your hands, to rid it of, any bacteria or extra, burden that would be on your system. And then the stomach starts, having difficulty, and then the whole body gets thrown out of whack. And, cancers start to develop and problems just start to persist. So fasting, of course, is a huge benefit as well, which of course is related to the stomach. But that recitation of, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, before you effectuate, the commencement of eating food, or the, the processing of a sheep, or before you begin your workday, it blesses that day. It has a spiritual impact and a spiritual effect, and it literally, on a molecular level, changes and protects and revives and does all sorts of things. So these are not just, silly superstitions or crazy traditions. These are real. And back to the Mohel program that we saw, the need and necessity for an authorized God-fearing Mohel to perform the circumcision. It's not a surgical, process, and they understand this. And hats off to them. I applaud the fact the Jewish community still holds on to this. The Muslim community is like completely lost on this. They're accepting these people, getting a certificate from any direction or from the internet and printing up a certificate on their computer and, handing them out like, cough drops or something. I don't know. They like this because they like it for themselves. They like that they can get, their own permission and their own thinking, and they're their own boss, so they don't object to anybody else being their own boss. So if he can do that, then I can do this, and everybody's happy. And they're completely lost. They're really without true understanding. And unless you get on a path that is attempting to cause you to open up these, spiritual senses of the heart, you're relegated to being an animal, the rest of your life. You have to fight that. And there are true and tried methods for doing that, and it will elevate you. And this is, what a true teacher will do. First, he'll, recognize the potential in somebody who has the ability to, progress in that area. And then secondly, he'll give you exercises to help you progress in that area. And then he'll tell you, not you tell yourself, but he'll tell you when you're ready to proceed and, entrust the health of other people in your hands. So again, forget, the Hijama, forget the Isnad, forget this Sufi word that scares everybody to death. And it shouldn't, but, that's the propaganda against it right now. Just a word, people. And understand that this purification of the heart is absolutely, a critical component. It's central to an Islamic understanding and a religious understanding and a spiritual understanding. An understanding of yourself, an understanding of the world around you. And, if you don't accept all those concepts and terminology, you must at least acknowledge and accept that somebody who is independent of your own ego is telling you that, without expectation of payment or reward or anything, is telling you that, you're ready to go ahead and do this based on what I've learned from my teacher. It's a much better system than somebody who goes on the internet and learns for themselves and decides within their own ego that they're qualified to be doing these things. So I don't know about you, but I'm going to go to the person who's been vetted and who's been through a process which, has a much better chance. Of course, it could all still be a lie, but it at least has a much better chance of being true than, the other situation. So, we'll get into the Hijama and Isnad and all that a little bit deeper next class. But I wanted to touch, and boy, we just like scratched the surface of spirituality. I feel like I haven't even, begun to really give you, what you deserve to understand and know about that. It should go way beyond what I've delivered to you. So my apologies for being deficient and not expressing maybe better what I'm trying to convey to you on that level. But, as I uncover maybe more information, I'll put it on the webpage. And, answer some of the questions there to try to get your brains engaged, your heart engaged. in the process and send those assignments in to me. And, look at the internet and try to contemplate and understand these things yourself. And by all means, if you can get into some sort of a meditation program, I won't advocate one right now. I'll tell you to just do, what your heart tells you is best right now. But there are methodologies that are absolutely more superior and better. It's like the Olympian, coach. He's teaching on a level that a high school coach is not able to teach on. Doesn't necessarily make it wrong, but there are better methodologies, and they are available. And you can, proceed and excel much faster and better with that type of methodology over the others. But it's another topic, another day. So, thank you for attending again, and may Allah forgive me and bless you for the honor of the most honored amongst creation, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Fatiha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi 'alayhim waladdallin. Amen. See you next class.